Hi everyone. My name is Sagar. I am the owner of 3dquickbooks.com. Today I'm going to explain to you something regarding 3D, and the reason that I'm going to explain things to you on a whiteboard instead of 3D software and making you understand the basics of Blender or basics of Houdini or Unreal or Cinema 4D for that example is because all 3D softwares have something in common, and that is right. So 3D, all 3D softwares, doesn't matter what it is, right, is doing one thing and one thing only, and they do it in a different fashion, they do it in a different way. It is what I mean by data manipulation is very simple. So with the data manipulation, the thing is with 3D essentially, what does data manipulation mean? Data manipulation means that whatever is happening in the back end of the software, whatever the data that thing is for whatever the developer has coded it to be like and allowed us to manipulate it, the existing data, right? We are just messing around with the values of that data so that it looks like something else, whether it may affect its shape or the way that its texture looks. So shape is very easy to understand because, well, if you take the default cube in Blender, close enough, and then if you like take the this thing like this face and you extrude it outwards, right? So the reason that again the whiteboard comes in handy because you don't have to wait for anything to show you on the software. You understand it by shapes and everything. If you can change the shape of that thing, it is essentially manipulating the data that is behind the thing. Or this part, this needs to be this long, and that's how we interpret things. That is shape. So that is how we manipulate the data behind the shape. So you take one thing and you elongate it, and now the whiteboard has done its magic. And of course, it's shown you what it can do without actually the need of going into a software first. Why? Because every software can manipulate shape. Unreal can, Blender can, Houdini can. It's not a matter of whether it can or cannot. It's just like all 3D softwares allow you to do data manipulation, and the way that we experience it is through shape. So I'm just going to keep on regurgitating myself a lot so that you understand. So what is meant by texture? So texture is nothing but data again, and the way that we manipulate it is through, well, quite a few things. But for someone who's just beginning in 3D, all you need to know is that we take images and we put it onto the 3D software itself. So whatever this shaded area, or what I'm doing, this will have a texture only if you want it to, right? So the biggest thing about 3D and why we are so attracted towards it as a thing that we do and as an art is because it allows us to give this unlimited opportunities to make this look like anything. It could be look like a brick, it could look like gold, it could look like anything because we have quite an extensive knowledge about how light bounces and how everything does that. But the way that we do it is through images, and we put them onto the 3D software itself. And then in the last case, of course, this is the end. So after we've done with the shape and the texture manipulation, and we've come to a conclusion that this is how the object is going to look like, or what we end up doing is we end up doing the rendering for it, right? So we go from shape, texture, rendering. Now you might be wondering, oh well, where does the camera angles and all these kind of things come? They come into play, but then they're like a discipline in itself. So what I mean by that is, as long as you are in a 3D software, these are the three major things that you're going to do. Everything rest of the things are just borrowed from other disciplines. So for example, if you talk about shape, where have you borrowed that from? We have borrowed that from a lot of architectural stuff, because if certain way a certain building looks from a certain time period, then we can obviously copy the shapes and copy the textures from whatever stone or whatever material it was made, and then we render it. So why talk about just these things? What happened to the whole composition and the rule of thirds? And I just skipped all of that. Well, I didn't skip all of that, and the reason that I did that is because those things are that make something hit home for the, what do you say, this thing, for what you're doing in the software itself. So that is independent of what you can look. So this is a very general overview of what a 3D software does. helps us, can give us shape, it can do a texture, and the thing is going to help us render. Right? These three things are something that a 3D software always does. Now some certain specialized software like the Adobe Substance Painter, I think that's what they're calling it now, is only for well doing texture. The Substance Designer, for example, or Adobe Designer, whatever that's in is again just for making texture. So it has nothing to do with the fact that or to give shape. Though people are doing very crazy things with that as well by giving shapes through well raising maps and everything, right? But the essentially the rules in 3D software is that you have the ability to do the data manipulation by making it shape, texture, and render. And why did I say data manipulation in the first place? Well, I said it in the first place because as an artist, and this is an artist guide to 3D. Thing is, when I talk about data manipulation, I just want you to forget about it from here on onwards. Why? Because I'm not a coder, and if you're not a coder yourself, so then knowing how the back end of a 3D software works isn't going to help us because we don't know how to code, and I don't plan to learn how to code either. So we are artists who are going to use 3D softwares, multiple. That's a plural softwares. Why? Because it is going to allow us to achieve the final the final look in the render. So these things, shape, texture, render, right, is always better for a 3D artist to look at shape, texture, and render in through different softwares, whatever makes you comfortable, whatever gets you the look that it wants to do. And the way that I've explained these things to you for regarding all 3D softwares, we're just going to take everything on the same basis, on the same principle that we have taken in general all of these things. We're going to look at the broad picture of all the 3D softwares that help us provide and achieve the exact same thing, right? So we are not limited to just Blender, though Blender is amazing and you should definitely learn it, and I'll get to that in a second as well. So now we're going to forget about data manipulation. Why are we going to forget about data manipulation altogether?